So by default, every method is non-static. So by default, every method is non-static. And if at all you want to make it static, you require to prefix the static modifier before it. So by default, every method is non-static. And to make it as static, we need to prefix the static keyword before it. Just like we are doing it in case of main method here. Every day we are doing for the main method now. So by default, every method is a non-static method only, and we can make it static by prefixing the static keyword, just like we are doing it in case of the main method. So every day for main method, you're prefixing the static keyword. Remember that. Is that clear? So that is the first important point. Okay. Actually, I will add a new class here. I'm naming this class as test methods. Test methods. Yeah, test methods. And guys, just watch it. In this, I'm writing one more method, one more class, methods. So two classes. So here I'm declaring int x is equals to 200 and static int y is equals to 100. One non-static field and one static field. Okay, both the two. So fine. Now I want to write a method, a public void add, static and non-static. Non-static, same way public static void sub. So you have two methods in your class. One is a non-static method and one is a static method. Now you have two fields also, one non-static and one static field, and two methods also, one non-static and one static. Now inside of this method, inside of the method add, can I directly write console.writeLine x plus y? Inside of the add method, can I directly write console.writeLine x plus y? Let's check it out. Just a minute. I'm writing a main method here. Console.writeLine. So which class should be set as a startup object? Methods and test methods. Test methods, because methods doesn't have a main. So you require to run only test methods. Okay, fine. Now again, yeah. What is your question? Can we directly write console.writeLine x plus y? And you said no. Let us see what error will I get if I run the code. Okay. Array, no error here. It's valid. You said no, it's working. You said no, but console.writeLine x plus y is not giving any error. Same way now I'm trying console.x minus y. Can I do it or not? Yes or not? Console.writeLine x minus y. Array, this is an error. X plus y did not give you an error. X minus y given you an error. So actually, why I'm getting an error in the second one and why I'm not getting an error in the first one? Listen all of you carefully. When we are learning about methods, static and non-static, there is only one point we all require to understand. Only one point. What is that? What that is? If your methods are non-static, you can directly access static members inside the method without any restrictions. What is that? Why is static here? You are directly able to call static inside the add now. Are you clear? While writing methods, if your method is non-static, you can directly access the static members inside of it. No problem at all. Whereas if you're trying to write a method as a static, you cannot directly access non-static members. You cannot directly access the non-static members. In the sense, sub is a static method. sub is a, and X is a non-static member. We cannot access non-static member directly. Then how to access that? We should access it by creating a instance. Methods M is equals to new methods, and we should call it as m.x. We should call m.x. Now run the code, and you don't have any restriction, any problem. I did not get any output because I did not call them. Now we have a doubt now. What doubt? The doubt will be, sir, sometimes you are directly calling, sometimes you are creating instance and calling, sometimes you used this keyword and call. So all this looks confusion, like when to use what? Yes or not. Okay, so let me give you an end card for all these confusions. Let me put an end card for all these confusions now. Okay, so today we'll learn how just you can access the members from one to the other. How we can access the members from one to the other. Okay, see what I'm just showing you is accessing members of a class within the class. Rules for accessing members of a class within the class. So our requirement is we want to access the members of the class within the class only. That's what exactly our requirement is all about. Okay. So what are the rules for accessing members of the class within the class? Let's try to understand about it. Say, I have a static member and I want to consume it from a static block. Are you clear? And remember guys, it's a direct access. You can directly call static members from a static block directly. Watch it. Why is static now? Don't look into the notes I said you. Concentrate on the screen. Why is? And sub is static. See now, why is it directly accessible EST? Direct access. Second thing, I have a static member and I want to access it from a non-static block. I want to access it from a non-static block. And remember guys, here also it is a direct access. Check it out. Y is static, add is non-static, and you directly called it. Are you clear? Next, I have a non-static member. Want to consume it from a non-static block. And remember here also it is a direct access. Here also it is a direct access. So now we'll be wondering, so everywhere it is a direct access and where the confusion is, we'll talk about it. See, X is non-static, add is, and you directly accessed it. Then where's the restriction? The restriction is only in one place, guys. What do you know? You have a non-static member and you want to consume it from a static block. And all of you remember this, can be accessed only with the help of class instance. That's all we have. We have a restriction only at this place on. Other than that, everything is a direct call. Then what about this keyword? Don't be confused with this keyword. Yeah, this keyword is what I used only when there's a naming collision. Without the naming collision, I did not use this keyword. Recollect yourself. When to use this keyword, I said you. When both field name and variable name are same, then I said you to use this keyword. Otherwise, it will not say you. Earlier, first we had X is equals to I. Afterwards, we changed the name. Variable name also is X. Then we got to write is dot X is equals to X. So when there is a naming conflict, then only this keyword comes into action. When there is no naming conflict, there is no need of using any this keyword anywhere. The only thing is you just required to understand about these particular four things only. That is why, see, from day one, all of you concentrate. From day one, we have just defined a set of members in it. Four methods. All the four are static or non-static? Non-static. Where are you calling from? Where you call them from? You call them from main is static or not? That's why you created instance and call. That's what. Non-static to static. Direct access is not there. Non-static to static access is done only with the instance. That's it. Remaining all are direct access only. See, all these are non-static members and main is static, that is the reason for creating an instance and calling them there, because we have a restriction. What that? Non-static members of a class cannot be directly accessed from a static block. Okay. And one more thing also we'll talk. Rules for from another class. I want to access the members of the class from another class. Now we don't require to talk about all this. Only two simple things. Your member is non-static. Your member is non-static. Okay. Call by prefixing the class instance. Call by prefixing the class instance. Your member is static. Call by prefixing the class name. That's all. Arey, how are you calling right line? Console dot right line. Why? Right line is a static method inside the class. So you're calling console dot right line. Understood the point? Okay. So within the class, we need to talk static, 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 non-static, 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 static like this. Out of the class, no need to talk about all these things. If it is a static member, prefix the class name. If it is non-static member, prefix the class instance. Say, right now I shown you all these four scenarios now. Watch it. Not here, guys. Right now I shown you all the four scenarios. See? What is that? Non-static to static. Static to non-static. Static to static. Non-static to static. Then instance required. Remaining all of direct access. Now we'll see the second one also. What is it? Consuming from another class. If you're consuming from another class here, listen. The first method is non-static, correct? So what should I do? Create the object of instance of the class. Come on. Methods obj is equals to new methods obj dot add. Second method is static or non-static? Static. So how to call methods dot sub. That's all. Methods dot sub. Check it out. You got your results. Is that clear? All the 6 points I explained you, I put all the things together here. You can just verify everything. Calling within the class, calling out of the class. When you're calling out of the class, that is a static blocker, non-static blocker is none of our business. Did you catch my point? When you're calling out of the class, rules are same. Static block different rules, non-static block different rules are not there. That's why straight away I said here. If there's a non-static member, fix the class instance. If it's a static member, class name. Okay, again, don't think like from static block or non-static block. The nonsense is not there now. Out of the class, is a static block or non-static block, none of my business. I should call it like this only. Within the class only, we need to talk a static, 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 non-static, 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 and non-static, static. But out of the class, nothing. Anywhere, it is going to be the same process. Any doubts? Understood? This is the only thing I need to explain you with methods. Because going forward, when you write methods, make sure if your method is static, if your method is non-static, if your method is non-static, non-static, static, both can be directly called off, no issues. But if your method is static, only problem comes. What problem? You want to consume any non-static members, then the problem arises. Why, sir? Why the problem arises? I'll tell you. I'll tell you the reason for you. Just let me comment this. I'm calling the method sub. Clear? When I call the method sub, the control jumps to the sub. Execution of the class started now. When the execution of the class started, all static members are initialized. All static fields are initialized. Yesterday we discussed. When is the static field initialized? Immediately, once the execution of a class starts, static fields are initialized, correct? So now, when the control jumps here, y is initialized here. Y is initialized, but x is not initialized. Because x is not initialized, I cannot directly call x plus y without initialization. How can you call that? When is x initialized? Only after creating the instance. That is why first you are creating a instance. Now x is initialized. Then you can add x plus y. Understood the logic now? That's why. Okay, you have doubt. So then what about here, sir? Here you are directly calling. Watch it. Why I'm able to call it directly? What am I doing here? When I create an instance, x is initialized already. Yes or not? And the control jumps obj dot add. Control comes here. Y is initialized. Y is also initialized. By the time you come here, x and y are initialized or not? No problem. But the problem is in the second one. You are directly calling the method. Until and unless x is initialized, you cannot perform the operation. So first what to do? Create the instance. So x got initialized. Then we can consume. And did you notice a new thing today? What is that? The instance is created under sub method. I did not create the instance in main. I created instance in sub. And do you remember this? Instance of a class can be created in a static block within the class. Any static block. I already explained you that. Generally we'll do it under main because main is static, but you can do it under any static block. And there is your example now. Sub is a static block. And here I'm able to create an instance. So this is a clear proof to you. What is that? Always you people think like instance should be created in main only. Array, not main here. It can be created under any static block of that class. The reason for creating under main is entry point. That's all. Other than that, it's not a rule you should create an instance under the main. Are you clear with methods? Any doubts, any confusions in the future about calling the members now static, non-statics and all? I've given a very big clarity about all their properties. Rules for consuming within a class, rules for consuming members out of the class. Here 4 rules, here 2. Here using class name, here using class instance. That's it. That's it about the methods. There's nothing more to talk about this. And to demonstrate this, I taken a code file and I defined the 2 classes in it. First class is methods. Second class is test methods. And don't forget all of you. You need to run test methods, not methods. Okay. Every time I don't mention again here, set this as a startup object. Which class contains main method? That should be set as a startup object. See the 2 classes. Who contain the main method? So test method only will run. Methods won't run. If you try to put methods, it will show you an error. What is that? There is no suitable main found in the class. So many people are posting it in the group. That is the reason. You don't have a main in your class. If you don't have a main in the class, you will get error. The main should be in a perfect syntax. What is it? Static void main. If you change anything, that won't recognize. Already in the day 1, I have shown you by changing this into lowercase. Do you remember? We got an error. You can't change anything at all. It should be exactly static void main. If required, string X, you can pass it. That is optional. Otherwise, it should be perfectly static void main. That's it. Is that clear on all of you? So this is all about how you work with the methods. Static methods, non-static methods. Finally, the last thing what we require to talk is about constructors. So last class, what I explained you fields, right? Next, methods. And now it is constructors. Now it's about the constructors. Okay, I'll tell you about the constructors. First, answer my question. What constructors are static and what constructors are non-static? What constructors are static and what constructors are non-static? Again, the same thing. Again and again, you are just not getting onto the things. Last class I said you with fields. Today I said you with the methods. Same definition you should give again. What is that? By default, every constructor is non-static, and to make it static, you're required to prefix the static keyword. At the same point I said with fields yesterday, methods today morning, and constructors also same. What is that? By default. By default, every constructor is non-static. And to make it as static, we need to prefix. We need to prefix the static keyword before it. Okay. All of you, close your notes. Want answers from you. Close your notes. Don't look into the notes. Okay. I just be expecting the answers from you. Okay. The first question I have before you is, constructors are implicitly called or explicitly called? Constructors are implicit or explicit? Explicit. Someone telling implicit. Implicit is wrong. Last class I clarified you that. Calling is explicit. Defining is either or. Defining is either or. Calling should be explicitly done. Calling should be explicitly done. Last class I explained you that now. Okay, but I want to change the definition here. I want to change that statement. What do you know? Non-static constructors must be explicitly called, and static constructors will be implicitly called. Did you catch my point? So last class you said implicitly called. Array, last class I explained you about non-static or static constructors. Non-static. That's why I said you they must be explicitly called. Today we are talking about static also. That's why I'm just changing my statement. What is that statement? What is that? Non-static constructors. Non-static constructor must be explicitly called, whereas static constructors are implicitly called. Is that clear? Now, what is the beauty of a constructor? Initialize what values? Fields. Initialize the fields of a class. Constructor job is initialize the fields of a class, correct? That's the first point I said when I talked about constructor. It is a special method present in your class responsible for initializing the fields of a class. So don't forget this. Constructor job is to initialize the fields. But yesterday, like fields are 4 types. What are 4 types? Static, non-static, constant. How many types of constructors are there? 2 types. Now, can you discriminate and tell me what constructor initializes what fields? Means what fields are initialized by static constructor and what fields are initialized by non-static constructor? That's my question. What fields are initialized by static constructor and what fields are initialized by non-static constructor? Any guess? Right or wrong? Just try. Both types of fields are there. First, a static constructor. What it initializes? Static. Perfect. Constant. Read-only also? Yes or no? Wrong here. Yesterday, read-only field you initialized under non-static constructor. Na? Recollect yourself. Yesterday, flag is read-only field. Na? Where you initialized? Static or non-static? Non-static. Then why is static constructor initialized read-only field? The answer is quite simple here. Yesterday, what you learned, relate the things, you will get all the answers what I explained yesterday. What did I say? The behavior of a constant is same as static. The behavior of read-only is same as non-static. If non-static field is initialized by non-static constructor, read-only also should be initialized by non-static constructor only. They were the same. The only difference I said you between these two is static can be modified, constant cannot be modified. And the only difference between these two is non-static can be modified, read-only cannot be modified. Behaviors are same. Only thing is modifiable, non-modifiable. Otherwise, the way they are initialized and the way the memory is allocated all are same. Is that clear? Okay. So, just what I'm trying to tell is we are aware that constructors are responsible for initializing fields. Okay, initializing fields of the class, fields of a class. Okay, they will initialize as below. Is that clear? They will initialize as below. What is that? Static constructor initialize static and constant fields. Okay, now understood? Okay, right. What next? When is a? Can you answer this question? and a static constructor gets executed. When a static constructor gets executed, see, what is it, basically, all of you learn everything bits and pieces here. You must combine the things. Yesterday, I explained to you about this. You did not tell about static constructor yesterday. Yesterday, I said your static field, na? When is a static field initialized? Immediately, once the execution of a class starts, who will initialize? Static constructor, just now we talked about that one, relate everything. Who will initialize? Then you want your answer now. Static field is initialized immediately once the execution of a class starts. Correct? Who will initialize? Static constructor. Means if static constructor executed only now, static field is initialized now. Then the answer is pretty clear. When does a static constructor execute? Immediately once the execution of a class starts. Are you clear? Relate your learning bits and bits. You need to combine everything finally. Got the point? What is the first point you learned? Static fields are initialized immediately once the execution of a class starts. Correct? Today what you learned in the morning? Static fields are initialized by static constructor. Yes or not? And if static fields are initialized by static constructor, and that happens immediately once the execution of a class starts, what is the meaning of it? Static constructor got executed now. When? Immediately once the execution of a class starts. Watch. I'll show you practically. Let me define a class here. We'll name it as constructors.cs. Any name, guys? Constructors.cs. I'm writing static constructors. What is this? Static constructor. Next. What is non-static constructor? Static constructor, non-static. Console dot write line. Static constructor is called console dot write line. Okay. Now let me write a main method because we need an entry point. We need an entry point. Do we have an entry point to code now? Okay. Now let's go to here and set this as a startup object. Okay. Run your code. Sir, you did not write anything in the main. No need. Watch it. Are you clear? Execution of a class starts. What will happen? Static constructor executes and initializes static and constant fields. What is your answer? What is that? Once the execution of a class starts, immediately static constructor executes and initializes static and non-static fields. Is the point clear? Then what about non-static constructor? When will non-static constructor execute? When will non-static constructor execute? From 2 days we learned about it here. After creating the instance, non-static constructor gets executed only after creating the instance of the class. Are you getting my point or not? Okay, I'll show. We already know that. I'll show you. Just a minute. Now here in the main method, I'm writing console dot write line. Main method is called. Okay, now run the program. What prints first, main method call or static constructor call or non-static constructor call? What is printed? The first block of code that executes in your class is always the static constructor. The first block of code that executes in your class is always the. But sir, you said entry point is main method. Now also I'm telling you entry point is main method only. But once it enters through the main method, it will go to static constructor, executes the code in the static constructor, then only it executes the code in the main method. Simple logic. Just watch. Yesterday, in the first line, you printed y value, na? Yes or not? If the main method executes first and static constructor executes next, then how can you print the main y value? Tell me. Did you get my question or not? What you thought, all of you thought main will execute first, correct? Huh? If main executes first and static executes next, static constructor executes next, you cannot print the y value. Why? And it should be initialized. Who will initialize? Static constructor. Means static constructor executed only y gets initialized. Then only the y value can be printed here. Otherwise, you cannot print the y value. Are you getting my point? So don't forget, everyone. The first block of code which executes in a class is static constructor. But execution starts with, exactly, execution starts with main method only. If you remove the main method, your code will not run. Check it out. Error. What is the error? And that's constructor means class name. Yeah, that the class name does not have a suitable static main method. There is no main method in the code. I did not find, I cannot run. So this is a clear indication to you what entry point is main. No one can change that. But even though entry point is main, first what executes is not main. It will come here, jumps to static, initializes the static fields and everything, then comes to the main method and executes the code inside of the main method. Okay. So what is our question? When does a static constructor execute? Are you clear? Static constructor executes immediately once the execution of a class starts, and moreover, it is the first block of code to run in your class. It is the first block of code to run in your class. Okay, na? But what about non-static constructor? Non-static constructor executes only after creating instance of the class, as well as every time you create an instance. See, till now you noticed non-static constructor is not called at all. So when is it called? Only after creating the instance. See, constructors C1 is equals to new constructors. Run the code. Okay. Again. Two times. Now, can you answer this question? In the life cycle of a class, how many times a static constructor executes? What is that? No, yeah, yesterday I said you this answer, not one. One and only one. That's what I said. Don't say one. What is it? One and only one time. Is it not the same thing you learned about static fields yesterday? Because both are related, yeah. Whatever you learned about the fields applies to constructor. Because that constructor only will initialize the field. You're talking about the child. That applies to parent. What is parent? Constructor is a parent and static field is the child now. Whatever you discussed about the static field yesterday applies always to the static constructor now. That is the root. Okay. What about non-static? In the life cycle of a class, how many times a non-static constructor gets executes? Minimum 0, maximum n. We learned about this in the last session also. Yes or not? Minimum 0, maximum n. What is it 0? No instance created, not initialized. N instance created, n times initialized. Minimum 0 and maximum is going to be n now. Is that clear, all of you? There's a question here. We have not defined any static constructor yesterday, but how static fields are initialized? And if constructor is not defined explicitly, there is an implicit constructor. I'm telling you from 2 days, I'm telling you that point already. Yes or not? If you don't define a constructor, what will be there? Implicit constructor will be there automatically. Okay? Understood, Rajesh? That's the answer for you. Denote static methods. I did not get your question. You just simply said and then about static methods. I not get your question, Vipul. Be clear. Okay. Okay. So are you clear till now? About calling and all the things. Now, the other question before you. For this is, if I don't define a constructor in a class, every class will contain an implicit constructor in it, correct? Yes or not? That implicit constructor is static or non-static or both will be present. This is the question. Shall I repeat? If I don't define a constructor in the class, there will be an implicit constructor in the class. We know this already, correct? Now the question is that implicit constructor is a static or non-static or both will be present. Did you get my point? Static or non-static or both will be present. What answer? No, guys, it's not static or it's not non-static. There are some guidelines for this. What are the guidelines? Guys, have a look. Rate the first point. Non-static constructor will be defined in every class except in a, but static constructor will be defined only if the class contains any static fields. Okay, I will tell you, just watch. Look at here, class test. I defined a class like this. After compilation, what constructor will be present in this class? Think, read the 2 points carefully. Think, answer. After compilation, what constructor is defined in this class? Static or non-static? Non-static. Remember, after compilation, there will be a non-static constructor in the class. Got it? Next, class test. Int x is equals to 100. Tell me now. Same again? Non-static is same, na? Okay? Right, you're right. Both the two scenarios, you're perfect. Next, class test. Static int x is equals to 100. Tell me now. Louder. Only static? Both, yeah, both will be there. You are forgetting the point. Read this. Every class except in a, I did not define any static class at all. All are normal classes only. So non-static constructor is defined in every class. Understood? That's what I said to you. The code you written in the notepad also contains a implicit non-static constructor. But what about a static constructor? Read the second point. If the class contains any, do you have a static field in your class or not? So after compilation, there will be both static and non-static constructors in the class. Okay. Now someone asked the question for them. That is the answer. What is that? You did not define a static constructor. How this got initialized? Once you declare static and constant, then automatically there is an implicit static constructor in the code now. There is an implicit static constructor in the code, and that implicit static constructor initialized this too. Are you clear? Then what about x and what about this x and flag? The x and flag are initialized by explicit. They're initialized by explicit. Okay. Next question. What's this? Static class test. After compilation, what constructor will be present? Louder. Wrong answer. Man, you're forgetting every point here. What did I say? Except in static means that is a static class, there is no chance for non-static constructor. Correct? Huh? Second point. There is no static field now. Why are you telling static constructor again? There is no static field. See, what is it clearly telling you? Static constructors will be defined only if the class contains any. Do you have any static field here? Huh? Tell me. No. So, non-static, no chance because the class is static. Second option, static. Static also won't be defined. Why? There is no static field inside of the class. There is no static field inside of the class. Louder, confidently. Static. After compilation, there will be a static constructor in the class. After compilation, there will be a static constructor in the class. Why? Static field is present, so static constructor. But here no field is there. That's why no constructor, not no constructor. There is no constructor at all. But see these three scenarios talking about what? Non-static classes, correct? In non-static classes, irrespective of a field, constructor will be present. Irrespective of a field, constructor will be present. Okay? But when you come to static, static constructors are defined only if they contain any static fields, otherwise not present. You have a doubt here. What is this? So this is non-static class. Here, when fields are not there, when there are no fields, then what is the need of the constructor? Array, that constructor is for instance creation. Yeah. To create instance constructor is mandatory. Yes or not? That is why static field present, non-static field present, not present, none of the business. If the class is non-static, there will be an implicit non-static constructor. Is the point clear? And all these rules what I explained to you here is, what is that? You don't have any explicit constructor. If you have explicit constructor, all this nonsense now. Yes or not? Because we are talking only about implicit constructors. Implicit constructors comes into action when there are no explicit constructors. Okay? So fine. These are the guidelines or the rules which tells you about all the things. See, I mentioned everything in detail. First class test, case 1. Non-static constructor. Case 2, non-static field is there. Present or not present, doesn't matter at all. This will contain a, but here see, you have a static field. So, both static, non-static will be present. Here, no constructor will be there. Here, static constructor will be there. Are you clear? So that constructor definition is completely based on what? Based on your fields. Based on your fields. What constructors for static? For static, the constructor definition is based on the fields. But for non-static, no fields, nothing. Every class, if it is non-static, will contain a non-static constructor for sure. That should be present. Okay? Finally, one last point. Look here. I want to define a parameter here in type. How should I pass a value? While creating the instance, see error. While creating the instance, we should pass the value. We already saw that. We already know that. We are getting error because we did not pass. Okay, we already know that. Now the question before you is, if static constructor is parameterized, from where should I pass that value? If non-static constructor is parameterized, we pass the value while creating instance. If static constructor is parameterized, from where should I pass the value? If static constructor is parameterized, from where should I pass the value? If non-static is parameterized, you pass the value while creating instance. Correct? Huh? If static is parameterized, from where should I pass that value now? That I value should be passed now, na? From where should I pass? Time of? Or if your declaration, then how you're passing value? I'm not talking about passing value. Static constructors cannot be parameterized at all. Why? Use your common sense here. The first point I said you, they're implicitly called. When they're implicitly called, why are you thinking this much time? How can I pass value? I can't pass a value at all. Why? I am not calling at all. Who is calling? The implicit call. Then when it's implicit call, how are you thinking of passing a value to it now? Did you catch my point? See, these are implicit calls, so no chance to pass. These are explicit calls, so I can pass. What is the error? See, a static constructor must be parameterless. It cannot be parameterized. This is the other important point. What you should understand, that was very static and non-static constructor. What is it? Static constructor cannot be parameterized. But why, sir? Two reasons. Reason one, it's implicitly called. Reason two, it is the first block of code to execute here, because that is only the first block. From where can you send the value? Did you catch my point or not? What is the first block? Static constructor. Array, that is only the first block. From where you have a chance to send a value now? Got my point or not? A group of people are climbing a hill. Who will support the first one? Who will support the first one? No one supports the first one. But from the second one, the first one will support, but the first one there is no support now. So exactly, think away same way. What is it? Static constructors are implicitly called, and also the first block of code to execute in a class. So there is never a chance to pass any value to them at all. Am I clear, all of you? So that's what these other difference what we have between static and non-static constructors. So to be clear, these are all the differences what I was explaining you right now. Watch. Read the first point. Yes, guys. Today only we learned about static constructor. Till now, whatever you defined it till yesterday, everything is non-static. You never defined static at all. The first time we tried a static is today only. Okay, second point. Point here. Static constructors are implicitly called. Non-static constructors must be explicitly called. Third point. Got the point? Non-static is non-static and read only. Static is static and constant. Next. You just go through yesterday's notes. Yesterday also we talked about the same point with the fields. Today we are talking about constructor because the field is related to constructor. Whatever behavior a constructor has, that behavior only applies to field also. But we learned in the reverse order. First we learned about fields and afterwards we came to constructor. Okay, last one. Okay, now that's what I shown you just now only. Fine. And already this is about to just now I explained you about how these implicit constructors are going to be defined. When did I say we cannot call static members explicitly? I said you we cannot call static constructors explicitly. Yeah, not static members. You're calling a static method. You're printing the value of a static field. You've done all these things. What we did not do is we did not call a static constructor. Rahul, we cannot call static constructor, not static member. Other static members can be called. We done it also. You write after the main method within the class only. Anywhere you write in the class, the behavior is same only, Pavan Sai. So you write inside the main method, sorry, after the main method, before the main method, doesn't matter at all. Means in object-oriented programming, we have a beauty. What beauty? In the class, you can write code anywhere. Fields, generally, where you declare fields? Top of the class, na? Declare them bottom of the class also, it will work. Declare them bottom of the class also. Yeah, it works. Because object-oriented programming, remember the point here. Already explained you. When you create the instance of a class, what is the first thing it does? Reads the class to identify the members. So where is it declared doesn't matter at all. Because first it is going to scan the whole class and identify each and everything. So you declare it on the top of the class, middle of the class, bottom of the class. It doesn't matter at all. But generally, what we do is we declare fields first. After fields, we go for constructors. After constructors, we write methods. There is a sequence we follow, but not any rule to follow. It can be defined anywhere you like. No need, John. Can I create instance of the class inside non-static method? No need. No need to create an instance. When you have a direct access, why you want to create an instance? Did you get my point or not? I'm telling you, there is a free access to something and you're telling I'll pay. That is foolish, na? I'm telling you, there is free access to you can directly utilize the services free. And you're telling, no, I will pay and use the service. If you want to pay, that's your foolishness, that's all. Okay, here also the question is, can we create instance of the class inside non-static method? No use. You can directly call everything there. When you can directly call everything there, there is no point of creating a instance. See, already talked. A non-static method can access static as well as non-static also directly. Then what is the need of creating an instance again? There's no point of creating an instance. Okay. Finally, we talked about all the three differences now. Finally, static class. What is a static class? All static members put together under one class is a static class. All static members put together under one class is a static class. Is my point clear? Everything put together into one single class, and that class is going to be a static class. Clearer or not? Actually, when C# was launched, static classes are not there. They're added in C# 2.0 version. They're added in C# 2.0 version. From then onward, static classes came. And every member of the class is static only. And you have a very clear example for that static class in your code. What is that, you know? Console. Console is a static class. Really? Yes. Console is a static class and every member of the class is going to be static only. I'll show you what. Guys, I haven't shown you this. You can see, means you can just see this console is a predefined class. Microsoft doesn't provide the source code to you. Microsoft doesn't provide the source code to you, but you have an option. Right click on the class and you'll find an option called go to definition. If you use that option, go to definition, it will give you the metadata of that particular class. It is just going to show you the metadata of that particular class. Actually, guys, means actually earlier in the sense, before before .NET 6, or in the older versions of the Visual Studio, in the older versions of the Visual Studio, if you try the option what I shown you, it will show the metadata of the class. Metadata of the class means it will show you the information like this. How public, static, class, console, and this class is defined in system namespace now. Namespace, system, and inside of it, it will show the signatures of all the methods. What it shows? Signatures of all the methods. Remember signature? I already told you the first line is called as signature. It will show you the signature of all the methods, like public, static, okay, public, static, void, clear. Public, static, void, right line. We have a right line method. Just what you're passing string str. Public, static, void, right. Public, static, string. It'll show you the signatures of the methods like this. What do we call method? This is called as. See, look at this. Classes and all the members are also static. But latest, in the current version of the Visual Studio, in the latest version, .NET 6, or the latest update of the Visual Studio, they have started showing the complete source code also to you. They started showing you the complete source code. Even though you did not have the source code, it will display the source code for you inside of it. So this is the complete source code of the class. And you can read the first line. It's a public static class. And this is the complete source code of the class. Lots of things are available. Lot of code. I'll show you the complete source code. But this is a new feature that has been added in .NET 6 and that to Visual Studio 2022. If you are using any older version of the Visual Studio and use the option go to metadata, go to definition, it won't show you the complete source code. What it shows is only metadata will be shown. Source code won't be shown. Only metadata will be shown for you here. Are you clear? But now you will see all the source code directly. Yeah. I just collapsed it, but you see, this is called metadata. Is how it will show you. Only the signatures. Only signatures. Okay. Don't bother about that. But look from the top. Look from the top. From the top, every member is statically watch it. What do you have first? Two constant fields. Array, two constant fields. The two constant fields, correct? And you know, constant is static only, na? Constant is static only, na? Let's see. Every member you see here is a static. Either static will be there or either constant will be there. That's all. You can observe. Did you find anything other than a static there? So that is the best example for a static class. So there no need any other definition for a static class. So basically they are introduced in C# 2.0. They are introduced in C# 2.0. Read it. If a class is explicitly declared by using static modifier, we call it as a static class and can contain only static members in it. No other things can be present in it. Okay. We cannot create the instance of a static class. Moreover, not required. Why not required? When every member is static, what is the need of instance again now? When all members are static, do you think instance is required for you now? Not required. So how do you write? Static class, class name, define only static members. And read the note. Guys, I said you metadata. Now it is not opening metadata, it is opening your source code, guys. But in all the versions, it is metadata. And that too in the Visual Studio 2020 latest update only they added. In the old update, it is not there again. Because when I prepared this document at the time 2022 only, but I don't have metadata. Latest update only they have just given. In the latest VS update, they've added that particular functionality. Okay. Go to definition, which will open metadata or source code of that class. Either means why you're telling or sir, older versions will show metadata, latest version will show source code. That's why I said you metadata or source code of that class. Okay, you'll have a doubt here. What is the doubt? Sir, once the class is declared static, do I require to declare the member also as static again? Yes, it is. Because you declare class as static, member won't become static here until and unless you say static. It is mandatory for you to write static before every member. Don't think like I declare class as static now, member also will become static. Don't think it at all. If you declare class as static also, members should be declared as static explicitly. That is mandatory. Out of the class, very clearly I explained you now. Out of the class, no need to talk statica, non-statica. The question, John, you're not following the class at all. This is a question. Earlier, you raised the question. Yeah, these two are related. Is the previous question. Can we create instance of a class inside non-static method also, right? And further I said to you, what is that? Array, not required at all. Now is changed, he is asking, not within the class, out of the class. Out of the class, I said you only two rules. Static or non-static doesn't come into action at all. Static or non-static doesn't come into action at all. And you asked the question, within the class, no need to create the instance, but my class present outside, I mean it is a separate class. I already given a live example for that for you. Where is it? Check it out. Statica, non-statica. Did I create an instance or not? I already talked about this earlier only. Within the class, rules are static block. Out of the class, anywhere you can create. The day when I started object-oriented programming, I explained about this particular point to you. Within the class only restriction is there. You should create another static block. Out of the class, static, non-static, doesn't matter anywhere you create. That's when now also when I explained you, out of the class I said you two rules only. What are the two rules? Static class name, non-static instance. But where to create I did not say, anywhere you can do. Okay? Understood, John? Yeah. Fine. Yeah. Guys, I just a small question before you. What the question is, before coming here, before you just come here, actually, some of you people might be having DBMS in your academics. If at all you learned computer sciences background, if you came from computer sciences background, you have DBMS in your academics. Database management system, DBMS, all of you might be having a knowledge on it. In DBMS, I just ask you a small question. In DBMS, what does a table represent? What is a table or what does it represent? Rows and I did not ask you what a table contains in it. I asked you what a table represents. To say table is a rows and columns, you need to study engineering, sir. Sixth standard student will tell that a table is a collection of rows and columns. I did not ask you what is a table contains. My question is, what does a table represent? Table is database, sir. Okay, table is not database here. Matrix. Table is matrix, sir. Data is a relationship mandatory, huh? You're only telling sometimes, no? It is sometimes means not mandatory, no? Data in the form of rows and columns. That's what Sai Simara. That's what I asked. I don't want to know what a table contains. Table is a collection of rows and columns. Anyone will say that. Collection of data. What does it represent? You forgot the main point here. A table represents an entity. That's what you learned. Go and refer your text box. That's what you learned in your DBMS. Table represents a entity. What is an entity? Any living or non-living object associated with a set of attributes is called as an entity. I repeat, any living or non-living object associated with a set of attributes is called as an entity. Can I call a pen as an entity? Can I call a pen as an entity? Pen is a non-living object, but pen has attributes. What attributes? The brand, the model, the color, the size, the weight, the price, all these are attributes of the pen now. Are you clear? So tomorrow someone asks you what the table represents. Table represents a entity. So what is an entity? Any living or non-living object, it is associated with a set of attributes, we call it as an entity. And remember all of you, tomorrow when you start building applications in the real time, you always deal with these entities only. You always deal with these entities only. For example, you are building an application for a school. You are building an application for a school. What is the first step you need to do, You need to identify the entities for this application. Any guess? What are the entities for a school? Student, yeah. Student. Teacher. Non-teaching staff. Right. Student, teaching staff, non-teaching staff. Okay. Next, you take a bank. Who is the entity? Employee secondary, yeah, you are forgetting the main entity. Customer, yeah, without a customer, you don't have business first. So customer is the main entity. Second level, employee. You are building an application for a retail business. Who is the entity? Customer, supplier. Who supplies the goods to you? Employee. Understood my point? Okay, so that's what. So every application will be associated with a set of entities. So tomorrow, when you start building applications in the real time, the first and the foremost important thing you're required to do is you should identify the entities that are associated with the application. Okay, so for example, just watch. What is the step? A school application, student, teacher. Otherwise, I can say teaching staff, non-teaching staff. Clerks and all will be also there. Business. Some customer, retail business. Customer, employee, product here. The product you are selling is another important entity here. And next, supplier, who supplies the goods to you. Got it? Fine. So this is the first step. Or the second step. The second step is the second step is you need to identify the attributes of each entity now. You need to identify the student is there. Tell me what are the attributes of a student? ID, name, address, class, section, marks, grade, all this. Parents' phone number. Correct. For a teaching staff, ID, name, address, phone number, qualification. That's very, very important factor here. Qualification. What subject he deals with? What is his designation? What is his salary? Apart from that, when you pay salary, I need your PAN card number. Got it? And today, one is mandatory everywhere. Aadhaar. Non-teaching staff. Non-teaching staff also similar attributes will come. But qualification is not important for me in the non-teaching staff. And no subject for him to deal with. Business, you take a customer. Again, ID, name, some attributes are going to be common, you know. What attributes are common in all these things? ID, name, address, phone number, Aadhaar. Phone number, Aadhaar. These five are common and mandatory for all. Common and mandatory for all this. Apart from this, depending on the characteristics, these attributes will be varying up. So what is the second step? The second step is you're required to identify the attributes of each entity. Some attributes I just picked up and used out there. Is that clear? Okay. So this is all about the second step. Third step. The third step is you're required to design a database now. The third step is you're required to design a database now. When you're designing a database, these are the guidelines you should follow. What are the guidelines? All the entities will now become tables in my application. All the entities will now become tables in my application. Means I have a table called student table. I have a table called teaching staff. I have a table called non-teaching staff. Is that clear? In the second case, customer table, employee table, product table, supplier table. All these will become the tables now. All entities will now become tables. Now table require columns now. All the attributes will become columns of the table now. All the attributes will become columns of the table now. Now you have a student table. What are the columns? ID, name, address, phone, class, section, fees, marks, grade will become the columns of the table now. Are you clear? So what is the first point? Entity becomes table. Attribute becomes column. Attribute becomes column. Okay? Next, the third important point. Every record you insert into the table, should be a unique representation for that entity. Every record you insert into the table should be a unique representation for the entity. It should be a unique representation for the entity. Are you clearer or not? So every record you insert into the table should be a unique representation for the entity. Means in a student table, you have 1,000 records. Means the 1,000 records should represent 1,000 students exactly. Cannot be more than 1,000 or cannot be less than 1,000 also. Correct or not? If you have more than 1,000 means it is confusion again. 1,000 should 1,000 means what is the meaning? Every record uniquely represents the entity now. Every row or every record uniquely represents the entity. Am I clear? Okay. Now you designed a database and you have put everything in the database. All the things are ready. Read this. Okay. No, your data is in a database. Can the end user access the database directly? You have an account in a bank. Your data means your information is stored in the bank database now. Can you access the bank database and see your data? They won't give permission to access your database now. Then how is it? This is the place where we are going to come into action now. What is step 4, you know? Build an application that acts as a UI between the end user and the database. What is that? Build an application using some programming language. Choice is yours. C#, Java, Python, whatever it is, your choice. We are choosing C#. So build an application by using some programming language that acts as a UI between the end user and the database. Means your application will now sit in the middle now. End user cannot talk with the database. End user talks with your application only. Are you clear? While designing the application also, we need to follow some guidelines now. What guidelines? You're working with object-oriented programming now. What do? You define classes. Yes or not? You need to define a class representing each entity now. You need to define a class representing each entity. Means entities are now classes. Entities are now classes. See, the approach is different here. In a sense, in relational programming, entities are called tables. In object-oriented programming, entities are classes. In procedural programming, entities are structures. Recollect, you defined a struct student in your C language, remember? Representing the student, that is the entity you define now. Got the point or not? All are same only. Approaches are different, that's all. Okay, there we say table, here we say class. And if you go to our old procedural coding, what we say? Structure. But all are same. Got it? Now, class you have now. Now attributes are there now. To represent the attributes, we define properties in the class. To represent the attributes, we define properties in the properties means fields here. You define a class now, public class customer. In the class, now you say public int ID, public string name, address. All these are the attributes, properties now. So we are going to define the attributes of the entity in the form of properties. Lastly, so what I'm trying to tell, a column in your table and a property in your class, both are same. A table and class are same. And a column and property are same. There we used columns, here we used properties. Finally, there we have records in the table now. Yes or not? Every record represents the entity uniquely, right? Yes or not? Every instance represents the entity uniquely now. So we create instances now. What we do? Instances. So if there are 10 customers, we create 10 instances. Each instance will represent each customer. Are you clear? And do you remember changes of one instance will never reflect to second instance? Object-oriented programming offers you security, as said, you remember? 10 customers are there, 10 instances are created. When one customer is working with his instance, second customer doesn't have any effect on his data now. That is the security object-oriented programming is offering you. Are you clear? See, you know one thing? You take an ATM machine. How many people will be using SK ATM machine at a time? Tell me. Throughout the world, throughout the country. Any number. But do you know one thing? For all these customers, one separate instance will be created. Where they are created? They are created on this server, not on your machine. Where they are created? Means if suppose 10,000 customers are accessing the ATM at a time, 10,000 instances are created for you on the server. But object-oriented programming, what it tells you, the changes of one instance will never reflect to second instance. I promise you, I guarantee you this to you. So all the 10,000 people can at a time work now. Are you clear? If changes of one instance reflects to the second instance, do you know what will happen? When one customer is working, remaining all the people should stand in the queue now. So you go to an ATM machine, you will come back after 3 or 4 days, eating, drinking, sleeping, everything you are required to do there only. Mera number kab aayega? You don't know. Are you getting my point? So that's what the beauty in object-oriented programming. Okay. So did you understand about the entity now? So now class is your entity. Properties are your attributes. Instances are your unique representations. Instances are the unique representation. So with all these particular points, what I taught you, And what I taught you from the last 1 week, I started object-oriented programming. After starting object-oriented programming, I talked about so many things. So your methods, instance creations, references, variables. Apart from that, static, non-static, methods, constructors, all putting everything together, combining all the things what I explained you. Tomorrow, I will teach you a case study of the ATM systems. How do they run? Is that clear? Okay. Meanwhile, read this now. Step 4. See, by using any programming language of your choice, it is not telling you what to use. Anything your choice, which should act as an UI, means between the end user and in managing the data present on the database by adopting following guidelines. First point. How many entities are there? That many classes also will be there for us. More than will be there. Because entity representation classes, apart from that, normal classes also will define. Next. Are you clear? Each property should represent each attribute. That property is your nothing but a field. Nothing but a field. Lastly. Each instance will be a unique representation for each entity. How many instances you create, and that will be a unique representation for the entities now. Are you guys clear? So this is what the essence of object-oriented programming. We'll understand it much more deep in this in the tomorrow session, understanding about all the things what we learned from the last few days. Clear? Let's stop here. We'll be tomorrow.